So Mark and Peter, again, thank you very much. Thanks everyone for coming along. And at times, Peter and Mark, if you would like breakout rooms, just ask me and I'll break people out into breakout rooms. Okay. All right. So Mark, over to you. Mark and Peter, over to you.
Thank you very much, John. Hello, everybody. It's great to be with such a big group online this morning. It's fabulous, and thanks all for coming, and thank you if you're listening to the recording as well. So Peter and I are going to do this session between us, and we will be asking somebody to be coached in a few minutes, and so you might like to think if that might be you. So just allow that thought to percolate while I share the slides here, and then we will begin. So, with a bit of luck, you can now see the opening slide. John, you want to give me a thumbs up if you can see that?
Yeah, I can see your opening slide.
Okay, yes. Good. Right. So, the session is about the user's guide to the future as a coaching tool. Now, the user's guide to the future was a framework that I introduced in my book, Host, which is about how to act as a host and how bringing people together in a good way helps the conversations, discussions, and results that you get. Both if you're a leader or a facilitator or a coach, you can learn about being a good host. And this was a framework that's in one of the chapters. And it brings some fairly classic solution-focused elements together, but in a slightly new way. And Peter liked it and suggested, and he worked on adding some more elements to it to make it a more complete coaching tool. And I think that's really good. And I really like what he's done. So this morning, we're going to introduce the model, which is me. And then Peter will lead a coaching session to demonstrate. We hope there will be time for a reflection moment in which breakout rooms, John, might well be a good option. And finally, a chance for questions and discussion. So that's our objective for the day. So let's begin. So the User's Guide to the Future, I introduce it with this quote from Maya Angelou, the marvelous poet, who writes in her poem On the Pulse of Morning, "The horizon leans forward, offering you space to place new steps of change." And I love this idea, the horizon leans forward. So we have the horizon on one hand leaning forward and new steps leaning outward. And somehow they connect, but they don't touch. And we'll explore how that works in the next few minutes. But I like this as a starting thought for this approach. So let's think about the future for a minute and how we view the future. Now, the ordinary, everyday, non-solution focused way of looking at the future, I think might be summed up in this picture. This is a very classic road, possibly in France, where they have many tree-lined roads, but it could be anywhere. This idea that the future kind of disappears off into the distance and gradually gets less and less and less and less detailed the further away that you look. And this is a sort of our everyday experience of it. But I'm going to suggest that we use the future in a slightly different way in SF in general and in this model in particular. We're not going to see it as gradually getting less detailed as we go away. On the contrary, it will be more detailed at some parts than at others. So here is kind of the different time zones of the User's Guide to the Future. And if we start, imagine here we are now on the left-hand side of the screen where the orange blob is. And on the right-hand side of the screen is the distant future, the horizon, as we might call it. And the horizon is as far as we could possibly want to see. And the horizon, of course, is where we're going to, in a moment, put our dreams and hopes and expectations that we want to work towards. And then you see these zones. So there's the horizon, there's just before the horizon, then there's a gap, which I will talk about in a few moments. Then there's the near future, and then there's the very near future. Now, there is no time scale in terms of actual days, weeks, and months and years on this diagram, because it depends on your project and it depends on the thing you're talking about. It might be as little as a month. It might be as much as 50 years or more. It depends on what you want to talk about. But the basic idea of these 5 zones holds good. So, as I said, on the horizon, we talk about our hopes, dreams, and intentions. Now, this is the thing that we want to work towards. Now, this is not necessarily a miracle question or a future perfect in solution-focused terms. It's much more like a kind of platform and an intention. It doesn't have to be in a lot of detail. It might be in a lot of detail, but it certainly doesn't have to be, as we'll see when Peter comes to lead the coaching. But it is the idea of here's the thing in the distance that we're trying to move towards. And it may only be a feeling or an idea or defined in one sentence at this point. That's fine. But it is the thing that we want to work towards. And in solution-focused practice, we're quite used to that, this idea of holding something in the future that we want to move towards. Now, this next zone is slightly interesting and less commonly used in everyday solution-focused practice, just before the horizon. And just before the horizon come the precursors to our hopes and dreams being realized. You might call them the building blocks that we need to have. And this question, what has to be in place for the hopes to appear and be realized? And this is something I actually introduced in the second edition of the Solutions Focus book. Some of you may well have this already. It was in the second edition, not the first, because there was a good story from Miles Shepherd of New Zealand about a case he did with very SF methods. And he used this idea from just before the horizon. And I think, particularly in a big project, it's a very powerful piece. So it's kind of taking one step back. But if we want this thing, the hopes and dreams, what do we need to have to get to that? And we will see that this forms an important piece of this model. Now, the near future, here we're much closer to now at this stage. There's still this central zone that I will talk about. The near future is the tiny signs of progress. Now, this is very familiar territory to many people on this call, I think. The tiny signs of progress that tell us that we are moving in the right direction. Of course, the sign is something you notice, not something you do necessarily, although you can do things towards the signs as well as look out for them. And so in the very near future, we have the small next steps, things that we can do quickly, typically in the next, I always say 48 hours, but whatever, things you can get on with and do that you're confident will move in the right direction, preferably things you can do without anyone else's permission. And we still have this hole in the middle of the model. What is this about? Well, this is what I call ant country. Ant country. And you see a picture there of ants scurrying around. So ant country was a term that was originally used by 2 British authors, Jack Cohen and Ian Stewart, who wrote various science books about complexity and what it means in life. And they also collaborated with Terry Pratchett, the science fantasy comedy author, in some very, very good books, worth reading if you're interested in that. But ant country is the part of the process where everything is so complex and interlinked and interconnected that you can't possibly figure it out from here. Now, in the classic view of the future, ant country appears like miles and miles and miles in the distance. Here, ant country appears as a sandwich. And bizarrely, it turns out that it's very useful to be detailed about the distant future and the near future, but it's not useful, usually, to be detailed about the middle future. And so we're going to try and avoid ant country in these approaches and see what happens to that. So where are we going to put our attention? Are we going to put it on the far future? Yes. Are we going to put it on the near future? Yes. Are we going to put it on the middle future? No. Actually, there are various ways of using the future, and here are a few that I've come across over the years. There are some people, and you may or may not know people like this, who spend a lot of their time with their attention on the distant future. And I sometimes call them dreamers. And dreamers can be very, very interesting and influential people. But they spend so much time wondering about, thinking about the distant future, that they never actually get around to doing anything about it. And indeed, I've come across more than one person who had these amazingly big ideas that were so big that anything they could actually do right now would be so small and insignificant as not to be worth doing. And so they never did anything, and so, of course, not much happened. Now, dreamers are, at least they can be inspiring, but they can be less effective than they might want. Other people I would call, I come across who put all their attention on the near future, and I call them sometimes realists. And there's the kid in the thing, and his out tray is full and his in tray is empty, and he's done it all. He's done the work. Yes. Now, this is a very great position to be in. You know, it really is to get things done, but perhaps without any attention on where actually in the long run are we going. So realists are very useful people to have around in your office. But if you want to kind of move forward, not the right people, at least in that way, to engage with. Now, one other version, before we get to the interesting one other pitfall. This is a job that I actually did for some years, a long time ago, in the British nuclear energy industry, the business planner. And the business planner spends their life entirely in ant country. As a business planner, I wasn't allowed to look at the current year because there was an operational plan for that. And I wasn't allowed to look at the distant future because there was a strategic planning department who looked at that. My job was to look at years 2 to 5 in the future of the business. And it turns out that this is the most impossible and frustrating position because you are looking entirely at the bit that will never actually get done. Because as soon as you know, time moves on, my year 2 becomes year 1. It's operationalized and it's out of my hands, and I'm back still looking at what might happen in the middle distance. So I found this incredibly frustrating, and in the end I got a job in a strategic planning department who were looking at the distant future, where I not only had much more fun but met Jenny Clark, and that turned out well, and we're together nearly 30 years now. So hi, Jenny. So the realist, the dreamer, and the business planner, not very good ways to use the future, compared to the host with the horizon leaning forward, where we have our attention on the distant future and on the near future, but not on the middle future. And so the picture begins to look much more like this picture of the Italian Dolomite Mountains, I think, that's on the screen now, where you can see the marvelous mountains that we want to get to. And you can see this path that seems to be leading in the right way, but actually in the middle, we have no idea what's going to happen. And of course, the thing to do is to walk along the path. And because when we get to the end of the path there, we'll be able to see a bit further. And that's the way of this combining of the big future and the small next steps and signs of progress. So, let's just sum it all up there. Let me just remind myself what's going to happen here. Yeah, so now we're going to move towards the coaching tool part of it. And so there's the user's guide to the future framework. And the next slides are going to be the things that Peter added to make this into a coaching tool. So Peter, would you like to pick up at this point? Would that be a good idea?
Yes, I'm delighted to pick up. And well, everybody in the SF world knows Mark. And perhaps I'm more known in the German-speaking SF world, where I just come from the Seoul DACH conference. But for all the others, I will just introduce myself. I work as an SF practitioner for already for 25 years, and my company Consult Contour is located in Cologne, Germany. I work mostly with people in leadership positions, supporting them in and their organizations in training, coaching, conflict management. And I just finished to edit a book together with Martina Scheinecker, who is also online today. Hello, Martina. And we introduce our book on solution-focused conflict management in organizations in Frankfurt right away. So I work a lot in coaching people in challenging situations. And that's why when I saw Mark scribble this model that you see here in much detail on a sheet of paper in Bad Pyrmont, I don't know if you remember, Mark, it was on the terrace and somebody asked you, how do you work in complex situations? And you started, well, I say, I have an idea, and you scribble it down, and I was fascinated by this model. And from then on, we discussed a lot about it, and I had the idea that it needs a bit of addition, small elements to use it as a coaching tool. And especially for clients with really challenging projects, challenging in terms of complexity, of long duration, of a lot of insecurity, where it's not only important to know where to put your attention on, but also to have an idea how you work along in managing that project. So first thing, name of the project. That's something that helps a lot to have a good name for your baby, or to think about a good name for your baby, not only for yourself, but also for everybody else you talk about with this project. The next element that I added is just the horizon. Where is it? Where do you think it will be in terms of years? And the last thing is a look at the past. The model is very much concentrated on now and future, and it's worthwhile to look at the positive past in terms of the resources from the past that could help you to surmount difficulties which will happen in the end country. It's clear. It will not go smoothly. There might be challenges in the end country, and then it's good to know what could help you in this tough situation. And that's all. These are all the elements you need to do a coaching session on a complex project. So, who of you is going to take the chance to be coached on his or her project for the next, I'd say, half hour? Mark volunteered to take some notes. In real life coaching, I have a flip chart and I take some notes on that. So you, in the end, you have something to give away for the client, and the client can work with that during the project. I will show that later. And again, who's going to take the chance? I've seen there are 47 participants now. Who wants to step ahead?
Peter, I'm up for it. It's Lillian from Singapore.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, Lillian. And just to give us an idea of your project. Could you please say some words about the project in terms of duration and complexity, just to have an idea if it fits to this kind of coaching?
Okay, I am looking at setting up what I call, so the name of the project, Retreat Before the Advance, to run overseas in South Africa, particularly in Cape Town, a retreat for people who are interested in taking time out to reflect on what their next steps going forward to achieve their goals, maybe frame their goals, next steps forward, galvanizing their strengths, identifying their strengths, galvanizing them, and leaving the workshop with that the next steps, kind of next steps, and then I think in Mark's model, very near future bits. That would require me to connect with people who are on the ground in South Africa. It's a destination choice here in Asia, particularly for Asians. And I wanted to use the kind of analogy, so experiences for people to go and do things, and to be able to be have a reflection time, and at the end of the experiences, and then to move forward, so in a small group community.
Okay, so this is a project that started already, or it's an idea that you want to follow?
It hasn't started already, but I've been thinking about it and talking to people for a while, and okay. 2020 is the year to make it happen.
Okay. Well, thank you for volunteering. I think, yeah, we should try and give our very best to to make it a good coaching session for you.
Thank you.
So you explained a bit about it, but what's for you and for others? What's the name of your project? What's or what would be a good name for it? A catchy name?
I don't know if I have a catchy name, but I think about it as the retreat before the advance. So lots of people are interested in going on retreats,
Yes.
but retreat also is a two-edged sword. So I wanted to make this a meaningful experience for people in order to take those next steps forward much more confidently.
Okay, so let's take that. Retreat before the advance. Very nice. So, and you said 2020 will be the year to start it. What's your horizon? Where do you think? What do you think? When will it probably be done in a way of, yeah? It works.
I'd love to be able to. I have envisaged doing this perhaps 4 times a year because it's seasonal, so in the different seasons. But realistically, probably to get it off the ground and marketed, we'd probably be thinking of towards the middle of the year, so at least the second quarter.
Okay, so what did you say, Mark?
Of which year?
This year.
This year. Oh?
Yes.
So, so you hope it will be working in the second half of this year?
Yes.
That's your horizon.
No, sorry, not the second half of the year. Second quarter of this year.
The second quarter. Well, that begins in April, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yes, so it's April to mid-year.
Okay. Okay, then. What are you wanting to achieve with that project? suppose it went all perfectly. What will be happening in your retreat before the advance?
Well, I guess an outcome for me, if it went well in the second quarter, that would encourage me to do it again in the third and then the fourth quarter, so that I could run these every quarter. It has a feeling of an holistic nature for me. It's a giving back. It's the country in which I was born, although I don't live there. It's the opportunity, so I guess bringing people there, but the opportunity for people who go on the retreat. It's the real opportunity to reflect by doing. So being and doing for me are important. And a very energizing. I think a lot of people, when they're thinking of retreats, are quite flat, maybe at the thought of going on a retreat. They're very in vogue at the moment. There are silent retreats, spa retreats, all these kinds of retreats. But I thought this would be much more of a being and doing retreat. So my people would come away with kind of re-energized to move in the direction that they've been thinking or wanting to go. And I suppose it's pretty much my story, but providing that for other people.
Okay, so there are hopes and dreams on two levels.
Yes.
What you described last was what you hope for the people who use these or who go to the retreat.
Yes.
Now they will be re-energized, and it will give them a good time to reflect and to be in a very energizing place. And on the other hand, it has also some hopes and dreams for you, that it's not a single event, but something you can do regularly. You want to give it every, what did you say, every 4 times a year?
Yes, each season.
Each season, each season. Which means there are enough people who are interested in it, enough people who are fascinated by that idea, and how many will be what's your best hope on how many will go to the retreat each season?
I guess something around about 8 to 12 people, so it would be small group.
Yes.
I think that, yeah, that's my thoughts for now. I haven't explored further, so but that would be the number of people which would be manageable, I think, for what I'm thinking of doing.
So 8 to 12 people 4 times a year, that would be an ideal outcome for you.
Yes. I mean, if beyond my wildest dreams this took off, this would be something that I could get other people involved in and to run these things.
Yeah, we can talk about that not next year, perhaps, but
Exactly.
this year it's okay. So it's and Mark explained it already in the model. It's not so much the future perfect, but really what do you want to achieve? It's a bit more on the realistic side. So you say 8 to 12 people.
Yes.
Okay. So this is what you want to build up. In terms of thinking about, think about having that in April already, and then perhaps in September or August. What needs to be in place for that to happen? What are the building blocks, the precursors, where you say, I have to look at these factors so that it has a chance to happen?
What has to be in place is, I think people, I have to connect with people. To me, it's not me just running this, it's people involving other people, as far as I'm concerned. So that's
That's one thing.
So I have started to speak to people. I have a friend on the ground in Cape Town who is a private tour guide, and she has a lot of experience of arranging events for groups of people, and knows costs and things like that. I have connected and been to see somebody who runs a cooking school and does corporate and training events, and floated the idea with him, and he's up for it. Using this analogy as it's all the ingredients that we put together in our lives, and we kind of cook it with love in a community. So there's that.
So let me just ask something in between.
Yeah.
Something you really need in South Africa, people who promote it in a way, who spread the word about it. Did I understand it right? Or
no, if I'm
no?
thinking of drawing foreigners, it would be marketing it internationally. I think would be Asia, I guess probably Europe. But these are people who would be involved in facilitating some of the events that would make up the retreat that I was talking about
So
in South Africa on the ground.
Yeah, so these are two different things. There should be people in South Africa facilitating it, and we have to think about marketing. That's also one building block. Yeah, people who do the work, and people who do or some marketing.
Yes.
What else? What could be other things you have to look at in terms of?
Have to look at the elements of the program. So in order to know who would be involved in facilitating parts of the program, I would need to put together holistically what this program would look like, what would the elements be, or options, because it may be that it's not one program, there's some things in common, but that people could choose different aspects of it. So possible, there's the cooking, there's social responsibility things, there's conservation, eco things, there's just a range of things that people could be involved in. And so it's thinking that through, putting it together in a process so that I had an overall view. It's also the place where people might stay. So those are very, very practical things that need to be put in place.
Yeah. So we have two things again now. One is the program. For how long do you think a retreat should last?
I think for people to go that distance, it's probably 5 days, but thought of attaching some tourist things on either end. So there are opportunities for people to go on safari, or in the different seasons, you might do different things just to enjoy
have 1 to 2 weeks, something. Yeah. Okay, that's one thing, an attractive program where people say, oh, I want to do that, I want to have that. And the other thing is a good location. That
absolutely. It's a destination place, and so people want to do the things that tourists want to do. So it's that balance between what I call being a tourist and a traveler. So the traveler is your life, but there's some touristic experiences that you might do.
Okay, so up to now we have, I think, four.
So I've been keeping some notes, Peter.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I can't work out how to put the notes on the screen and have the slides on the screen at the same
Yeah.
time. But I have just put what I think are the 5 precursors that were mentioned in the group
you're
chat.
fine. Yeah,
I had 5. Maybe there were only 4, but I had the connecting with people, having people in South Africa, getting marketing, putting elements of the program together in a process, and a place to have it.
Yes.
Tourist things. So, would you like to edit that? Do you think there are 4? The reason we're having this conversation, folks, is that this is an important piece in the process because these topics are going to come up again.
Yes. Yes, and I don't know if the slides are so important now. We can make a go through afterwards. Can you share your notes?
Yeah, sure.
Somehow?
Yes, I'm sure I can. Hold on one second.
So you see, it's a premiere. We never did that online before. Ah, great. Great.
I'll try and make it a bit bigger.
No, yeah. So Lillian, if you have a look at it, are these the 5 precursors you have to look at?
Probably 1 and 2 are similar or the same.
Yeah.
It's connecting with people who could do their thing on the program. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And the first is already connect with people who will involve other people is already some kind of marketing, isn't it? It's a bit connected.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So do you want to take marketing out or keep it as a separate one?
Well, the one the one is in South Africa, which is the people in South Africa who can offer something and they would facilitate their bit. But marketing would be to Asia and the rest of the world. That's not South Africa. So it's other places, the tourists who come to South Africa or people who want to come, but might feel that it's either too much money or it's the opportunity to involve. It's a development opportunity for them as well as tourism, as well as a holiday kind of thing. All of the above.
Okay. So what do you think? Is it enough elements you have to look for the next few weeks or months to make it happen? Or is there something else that's critical, that's really important to look for? Like,
I think for now, that seems as if that is what would get me going, and those steps forward with that in mind. I know that I've got to have that in place is important.
Yeah, so let's keep it like that. I'm always glad if it's not too many of these building blocks. It makes life easier. So now you have only 4 things to watch for a while. Now let's look at the time in between. If you started right away, there might be times in which you think, "Oh, how could I have this idea?" It becomes tough and it becomes difficult to achieve your goals. Which of your resources, which of your experiences will help you to surmount difficulties that might happen on the way to to success to your retreat in April? What could help?
Okay, probably my resources are my passion for this, and also enthusiasm for it, and also the connections that I like making with people. And so, and then I'm so enthusiastic that I communicate that to them and they get excited. And I saw this recently. So that's what suddenly galvanized me. I think it's also being able to put together a process, and in the past 2 years, some experiences with retreats and running development workshops in various places. I haven't done that recently in South Africa, but I have done that before in South Africa. But I've run and been part of workshops here in Singapore, on some of the islands outside of Singapore. And so that's been fun. I thought it would be a lot of work, but my ability to draw people in and get people doing things and tapping into their ideas made it feel really fun.
That sounds great. So that's a lot of resources that could help you on the way, whenever you need them. So let's look at the precursors again, at the building blocks. We're now in the very near future. And if you think of the first one, connect with people in South Africa to help facilitate and run it, what would be tiny signs, what will be tiny signs of progress that show you there's something happening already?
There are two people who I am connected with. One is a person who runs the cookery school, and I floated the idea when I went to see him, actually, and I floated the idea by him, and he was so up for it and excited and said, wow, that sounds fantastic. Yeah, that would be great. So he was up for it. And my friend, who is the private tour guide, she specializes also in wine, and she runs wine workshops for people. So and talking to her about it, so I've got those connections. And then maybe after that, to put that process, I think putting a process in place, thinking it through and putting a process in place with some options, I think, because that will then allow me to approach different people, approach the right people. I think my friend who's very connected would be able to connect me. And also last year I had to source some people in South Africa for a project which was being run from the UK. The project didn't materialize, but 30 people approached me who have leadership development, OD experience, and in South Africa, and so I'm connected with them. I personally responded to each one of those people. And I also think there are people who are part of, and I have not connected with them, but they're people who are part of the SF community in South Africa, who there's a ready-made network, I think, who I need to connect with.
Yes, and perhaps this session will do something to do some marketing for your project. But if you look at that, I have the impression that it's a mixture of things that are resources, but where do you think you will see first tiny signs of progress in that respect? Where will you notice? Where will you be noticing?
Well, I think if these people, if my friend and the guy I met, they're the first people and they agree and they're up for it. And secondly, that I have a process in place that I kind of think, yes, this is it. This would work. That for me would give me a lot of further courage, I think.
Okay.
To step out and...
Well, for me, it doesn't sound like tiny signs of progress, but, well, signs of progress. I tried to encourage you to look at very tiny things, so it's not too challenging to succeed. But it's always subjective. Might be tiny for you. For me, it sounds quite a lot of effort to get that.
Well, the first step, I think, is replying to an email. So applying to Brett, who runs the cookery school.
That's a step, not a sign.
Sorry?
The step, not a sign.
Yeah.
We're going to be specific about this.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
a tiny sign that you would notice. Sorry, Peter.
No, thank you, Mark. It's we will ask you for the next steps afterwards. Yeah? But now it's just about how will you notice that you're moving on?
Well, I have a process. I have designed a process. And I have the agreement of the people I'm approaching, the first two people, to go further.
Okay. These will be clear signs. Thank you.
Yes.
Now, I'm looking at the clock, and perhaps we can make it a bit shorter in looking at the next building block, marketing. Yeah.
Sure.
And where will you be noticing tiny signs of progress in that?
Maybe setting up something on social media, having a story to an idea, maybe a teaser in place first about what's coming. That would be a first small sign.
Again. So is it yeah. To see that there is something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so then let's take the third building block, which was elements of the program. Where will you see small, tiny signs of progress there?
Tiny signs is that I block out time in my diary in the next week before Chinese New Year and everything shuts down to think about this.
It's an action. It's an action. What's the sign?
Well,
in my diary, there is a space blocked out with this. There's some. It's in the diary.
Yeah.
Design time.
What else?
Emails are sent to my friends, these two people.
Okay. So just to show how it works, the last element was,
Place.
let me see, a place. Yeah. Where will you be noticing tiny signs then?
That I have a short list of places which are possible for a retreat, to run a retreat.
Yeah. Okay, let's keep it like that. And it's a bit of a mix-up, and I think it's because it's a project that's already working in your head. You have already some ideas what to do and how to do it. And so if you look at these tiny signs of progress, where do you see most important and attractive small next steps to do?
Most attractive would be connecting with the friends and looking at places, so the short list of places, and designing the process.
Okay. All things you could do in the next week?
Probably the next 2 weeks.
Okay.
So what would be a tiny first step towards each of those that you can do in the next 48 hours?
In the next 48 hours is, responding to their emails. So responding to the emails that are sitting in my box. Going to the list of top 10 places for retreats in the Cape. And choosing a short list from there. So that's go to the list, choose, and send an email. Yeah, that would be sending an email to them and finding out if it's possible.
And how about the process designing?
Okay. In the next 48 hours, I think telling myself, since I embarked on this little coaching jaunt, I better kick myself up the backside and start thinking about it in detail.
Okay. Thank you very much. And thank you, Mark, for keeping notes. That's such a relief for me to have that and to refer to the things here. So we have run through the coaching process once, and we can explain after a little reflection time how you can use what we did here in pursuing your project. You see here a template. And just imagine you have your project name, horizon, hope, stream, intentions, resources, all noted in there. And perhaps from time to time, every month or so, you look at it and look if it's still what you've been thinking of. But on the lower part of the template, you have the precursors, the form, you have the tiny signs and the next steps, what you just did. And you take these, well, every week at least, or perhaps every 2 or 3 days, and actualize them, and so you go on, and that's the way we think you can work in an iterative, agile way to develop that project. And go through the end country to get to your hopes and dreams in April.
Thank you.
Possible? Yeah?
Yeah, that provides a very helpful structure.
Lillian, could you just give us a short feedback? What was useful for you in being coached?
Okay, well, I think what was helpful was just taking a leap and putting the dream out there to be coached on was helpful. I think secondly, actually being asked the questions, and then interestingly having Mark saying, no, a sign, and being clearly pulling me into the now, because I'm very good at the big picture, and this is a dream in the making for 20 years. So, you know, I keep having the big picture, but pulling me into the little steps was very helpful. A third thing that was so helpful, and I thought, how the hell could I do this when I'm coaching, is actually seeing what I was saying on the screen. It seemed bizarre, but it was almost like somebody was writing out a contract for me that I was going to have to commit to. So I had to be very careful what I was saying. Really grounded me in reality. And then I think you pulling me into, wow, that sounds like a big step, but maybe a little step. And that also made me think. I think the end, at the end, the overview, I don't know what to call it. I suppose it's the review, project review. I don't know whether I will use that, because I don't use things like that, but it probably would be good for me to have it written down somewhere so I can go back and check. I do find when I write things down in lists and that I do go back and tick them off and check, and get an extraordinary pleasure from ticking things off to show that they're done. So yeah, I think it's almost taking the intention and putting it into reality that was so helpful with the process, just in a half an hour.
Thank you very much. And I think that part of a project review is especially important for teams. In a team, you can exchange about it. So, okay, let's make the round up.
I found it interesting going from linking the tiny signs to the precursors. I hadn't seen that done before, and that was really useful to really ground what those building blocks would look like if there was some progress made in the short term on that. So yeah, I really like that link.
May I ask a question?
Of course.
Thanks. I wanted to ask Mark and Peter what you felt the difference was between a sign and a step.
Okay, that's a good question. So a sign is something you notice. It's something that it's a small thing that you notice has happened, or has appeared, or maybe it was always there but you've just noticed it. So it's not necessarily an active process to create. A step is something you do, and steps, of course, can lead to signs, the appearance of signs. But there are other ways that signs appear than with you doing things, either because they were always there but you didn't know they were important, or because other people turn out to have something, done something that's useful to you. And so signs is about awareness of, raising awareness of discovering things that are useful. And in the classic example, it's a bit like deciding that you're interested in buying a yellow Volkswagen Beetle, and then discovering that everywhere you look there are yellow Volkswagen Beetles, but you didn't know that before because you weren't noticing them. So, and in the sort of the more recent developments of solution focus, this idea of signs is becoming more and more, I think, a key priority in what we talk about. And of course, signs suggest steps. And here we make quite explicit that link with next steps, what you're going to do. Other people seem to leave it at signs and say, well, people know already what the steps are going to be. Basically, they should just get on with it. So that's a matter of taste, I think. But signs is really interesting, I think, and it's underused so far, even though it's been around for a long time.
Well, and it's not only signs, it's signs of progress. And progress is one very important principle in the whole model. It's all about progress and being a progress detective and work with progress and enlarge progress, and that's the leading principle.
Peter, can I add a comment then? This is Tim from the UK. Just to build on the issue of progress, I noticed the coachee was very keen to tell you at times progress already made, and I think to honour that would be another strength in the coaching session, because that builds on, that's asking, so what progress have you already made in relation to these aspirations? And that also links in with their strengths and their abilities that would then be applicable into Ant Country as well. So for me, I would have explored more around, so what have you already done? And if you were to take that a step further, what might that step be and what might you notice? So that's something I noticed.
Mark, it's John. Could I just ask you a question? Could you explain a little bit the term precursors and what you mean in this context? Because precursor for me is just something that comes before. How do you? What does it actually mean? Can you give us a slightly?
Well, that is exactly what it means, John. It is something that comes before. So it's something that comes before the hopes and goal and aspirations that are on the horizon. So just before the horizon, what are the things that will need to be in place for that to happen? So it's a good example. Lillian wants to run a retreat in South Africa, or a series of retreats. One of the things she'll need is a place. But it's about working back from the horizon, not out from where we are now. This is the interesting thing for me about this model. There's an element of working back from the horizon. Try and get this the right way around for everyone. Working back from the horizon. There's an element of working forward from now, but they don't touch. That would be a plan if they touched, and they don't touch because there's always this uncertainty in the middle of the Ant Country. So working back from the horizon, working forward from where we are now, and that's a good place to be. That's the idea.
So do your tiny signs relate to the precursors?
Well, in this, because it's a way of focusing. It's a way of focusing, I think, because in NSF we often ask, so what would be the first tiny signs of progress? It's a really classic SF line. But here it's focused down onto tiny signs of progress about the precursors. And sometimes in a big and complex project, that helps people just to kind of grab onto something and be confident that their signs and therefore their steps and actions and focus are to do with something that's important to it. With a really big old baggy complex project, there are all sorts of signs that might be there. This focuses it down a little bit.
Hi.
Hello, Victoria.
Thank you again for the, yes. Thank you again for the demonstration. I still remember you coaching me in Budapest, and the project has been developing well. Thank you. So my question is actually about the signs and steps also, because what I have noticed in this case also that people are much better in producing and speaking about steps rather than signs. Yeah. And sometimes they are just struggling through to understand what you want from them when you ask a question. What will be this signs of progress? How do you usually encourage people to be in more noticing mode, to notice and to understand the signs better?
Yes, sometimes it's just good to explain the difference between signs and steps. That helps, and then just be patient. Just look at them and expect an interesting answer, and be very curious about what signs could appear. And I think that the most important thing is signs are not things you have to produce. Something can happen in the environment, in the surrounding, or somebody else takes it up and does something, and you just notice it. And I think that's a very, very important aspect of that it's not always you acting in that project, but that it's all interconnected. And that is very, very helpful to look at things that happen without you doing it.
Yeah, that's very true. Thank you very much. Can I just ask another question, a very quick one? Do you ask any questions about the end country?
Well, this is Peter's interesting contribution to this, because in the original version, no, you don't. You just leave it, forget about it, ignore it. Because as soon as you start getting interested in ant country, it's like the siren song of the maidens asking interesting questions and singing beautiful songs that will tempt you onto the rock of disaster, despair, and trying to make a long-term plan, which is the thing that we're trying to avoid. So I always taught people to avoid ant country, but Peter's interesting contribution to this was this question about resources that will help you in ant country. So, and I think that's another different angle, which is very interesting, because we're not trying to make the plan that bridges the distance and the now, but we're trying to say, look, inevitably there will be, difficulties and unexpected turns. But so when that happens, what will help you? And that helps us go forward confidently, I think.
So could it be just a question about what you are not thinking of, but could evolve in this country?
Well,
it will be misleading.
You can do what you like, but I think that this is part of the process. Is if you start thinking about that, then where does it stop?
Okay. Thank you.
That's for me. If you start on that line, then you're kind of, you're beginning to move towards the siren's call and the rocks of destruction. So the book, the host book has some nice examples of things that started as tiny first steps and gathered momentum because other people were supporting them and they turned out to be the right thing at the right time. But, who knows what will happen? But that doesn't mean you shouldn't start.
Thank you.
A manager has a conflict with a team or with an employee. Could you use that this topic too?
I never tried to use it in these situations. It works very good in complex projects and projects that are even much larger than Lillian said. Victoria's project is to change Ukraine, her home country, into a solution-focused country. Yeah, and that will take quite a while. You said 30 years or so. Huh? This is a large project, and even in these projects, it can help to do. Okay. But in conflicts, I would work in different ways.
Okay.
Yeah, I go along with that. You need a future hope, and preferably a shared future hope. I mean, I can imagine if you did this one conflict, you'd end up with something, but it might be rather unbalanced. So yeah, complex projects and enormous hopes. This works really well for huge. If you want to save the world, you can within a few minutes come to something I can do to start that. Now, you may or may not end up saving the world, but at least you'll be doing something that's focused and doable and seems relevant. So it's another way I've used it is to help people prioritize. People who have very busy jobs with a million things going on. There was a very stressful senior manager once, and in an hour we had gone through his hopes, his precursors, his signs, his steps for each of the precursors, and he'd turned in this mess of complexity and stress into a punchy list of things to do in the next day, and he was delighted. He was absolutely thrilled, and he was much more relaxed, and he felt able to, all right, I can do that. Let's go. So that was very helpful. We've just got about 2 or 3 minutes left, so chance maybe for any final comments or questions before we close up.
Chance to thank you very much for this demonstration, because it was useful then, it was useful now, and I think anyone could and should maybe even try.
So with just ways that you can take this forward, if you're keen, everyone, there is an article in the SFIO Journal Interaction online that we wrote up following our presentation in Solworld in Budapest last year. That's on the SFIO website and well worth reading. And that also contains, I think, some details about the coaching that we did with Victoria on that occasion. The thing originated in my book Host, so it's in there. There's also an article by Peter and me in this latest book, the Host Leadership Field Book, which was published late last year, which is a companion piece, which is 30 small cases of people using host leadership ideas in different ways, including this user's guide to the future. So if you're interested, this is a new book from me. It's out there right now. And there's also my website, hostleadership.com, and Peter's website, solutionsTools.de, which both have information about this as well as lots of other things.
All right. So Peter, Mark, thank you very much indeed for donating your Sunday morning to this global chapter meeting of SFIO. If you're not a member of SFIO or contributor to SFIO, I should say, then we would love to we'd love to have you on board. So Peter, Mark, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Joining us all over the world.
It was a great pleasure.
Bye for now.
Sleep well, have a good day, wherever you are, whatever the time.